We're so glad we have Tyler.
There we go.
We're so glad we have Tyler. So this one is is this the YouTube one?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And for some reason those aren't loading.
Yeah, that's all right. I'll just keep talking.
It's okay. I got it.
That's all right. Tyler's getting things fixed. That's okay. I'm pretty sure everybody can still hear me anyways, so that's
There we go.
awesome. Perfect.
All right, we're back.
Yay, and we're back. Thank you. Anyway, yeah, as I was saying, Broderie Perse is actually a type of applique. And so I'm going, oh, I like to do applique. Let's learn a little bit more about it. So I go online. Where do we get all of our information these days? And I stumble across the most amazing story. So I'm actually going to tell you about it before we get into our technique. In 1841, there was a charitable type society in Britain called the British Ladies' Society for Promoting the Reformation of Female Prisoners. And they worked with the women who were being sent on board ship to, do you remember the term from high school? Van Diemen's Land, what we now know of as Australia. And there was a lady named Elizabeth Fry. She ran the society, British Ladies Society for Promoting the Reformation of Female Prisoners. And during the 25 years that she was in charge of that society, they actually sent 12,000 women on these ships across the oceans to Australia. So part of what her society did for these ladies was to provide them, before they got on the ship, with some of the basics, things like knives and forks, and particularly important, sewing materials. So on one ship, was called the Raja, the women of this ship created a quilt. It's now known as the Raja Quilt, and the technique they used was Broderie Perse. And that quilt, it's one of the few quilts from that time frame that we know very much about, because they put on the back, and we should all remember this, a label. The label reads, "To the ladies of the Convict Ship Committee, this quilt, worked by the convicts of the ship Raja during their voyage to Van Diemen's Land, is presented as a testimony of the gratitude with which they remember their exertions for their welfare while in England and during their passage, and also as a proof that they have not neglected the ladies' kind admonitions of being industrious." And it's dated June of 1841. So that quilt was presented to the governor's wife in Australia, a lady named Elizabeth Fry, or no, it was presented to Jane Franklin, the governor's wife. She then returned it to Elizabeth Fry in England, and then it was forgotten. They lost track of it. Fortunately, there was a label on it. The quilt then became forgotten until it was rediscovered in an attic in Scotland. It was returned to Australia in 1989, and it's now on display in the National Gallery in Australia. So I'm going, that is a story in itself. So if you think that these quilts you make are, they're just quilts, no. You never know when something that you make with your two hands is going to live on through the centuries. So I'm going, I got to learn something more about this technique of Broderie Perse, because that's what that quilt, how that quilt was designed. So if we go back to that time period and before, you've all heard of chintz. We know chintz as an upholstery fabric. In the old days, quilts were made from a variety of different fabrics. But the one characteristic of chintz is it's got big flowers, usually distinct flowers. It was how they were able to print them. The other characteristic about it, it was expensive. And so what people started to do most frequently with the large floral fabrics was cut out those flowers. They might buy, instead of the 12 yards of fabric they would need to make bed curtains for their bed, they might buy 2 yards because they could afford it. And then they would get some softer fabric, some cheaper fabric, and they would cut out those flowers very carefully and applique by hand those flowers onto their bedding, onto their quilts, onto their bed hangings, and that sort of thing. So it became a technique on its own, and I think we can do all kinds with it by adapting it to our current needs. So if you're ready to learn a slightly new technique, might not be new to everybody, but I think this is one that I'm going to pursue for a little bit. So I'm going to switch camera feeds here for you. We'll put blue up. There we go. And I've kind of already gotten started. I have my main piece. I cannot see the screen at all, so hopefully you can see. It looks like the camera's pointing at it. Oh, it looks pretty good. I have my main piece, and it is already fused down. And it didn't, but it could have come from any one of those gorgeous fabrics that Dawn has got set out behind me. So you get yourself some fabric with some nice distinct images, and I'm not hand appliquing this, although I could, but I'm doing it with a fused applique. So I have ironed onto the back my fusible web, and I've been generous. I just ironed a big piece onto the back of a couple of different fall fabrics. And it's okay to piece things. It's okay to just slap it down. My personal favorite, and please don't anybody give me static about this because I've used it for years and I like it. My personal favorite for fusible web is Heat and Bond, and this is the Heat and Bond Featherweight. And I like it because it's soft. I don't know if you can see that. Hopefully you can see that. It has a good hold. It's easy to work with, and it keeps relatively soft. So you get your fusible web pressed on there. You leave the paper on for the time being, and then you're going to fussy cut the images out that you particularly want to use. And what I like to do, there's my image, is I cut out a whole bunch of things before I start laying things out. Now, this is where it's really nice to have a pair of micro serrated scissors. So obviously we have the Karen K Buckleys. They're great, come in 3 different sizes. These are the 2 smaller ones. What I happen to be using are the Clover micro serrated, just because my Karen K Buckley don't leave the house. They're precious. Now, if you've never tried fussy cutting, I love fussy cutting. There's a trick to it that instead of doing this, you know, you get your arms all twisted around, you want to hold your scissors like this, and you want to gradually cut along the line this way. And when you come to a turn, you're not going to turn the scissors, you're going to turn your fabric. So you can make very delicate cuts. Snip piece. And it is often easier to, instead of cutting a whole long stretch, to do it in segments. You get sharper corners that way, sharper indentations. Snip it off, and you get to make a wonderful mess. And then you can, men seem to love to vacuum, so you can give your husband the vacuum and get him to clean up after you. So you can see the scissors are staying still, except for taking those tiny little bites out of the fabric. And it's the fabric that I'm rotating. So you're going to fussy cut whatever pieces out of your fabric you want to use. You can do large areas like this first one that I've already got fused down, or you can do small subsections of that. Cut it apart, rearrange it. So the idea is when you're fussy cutting for fused applique to cut away that background. You don't want to leave that little halo around things. So now I've got that little really skinny stem, and I can make a decision whether to cut it and fuse it or whether to replace it with a stitched line. And I think from a design standpoint, I'm just going to snip it off. So there's another leaf ready to go. Once I've got a whole bunch of pieces cut out, I can start designing my, I think this is going to be a nice little table runner. I have my one large piece set there. So now I can start building around it with some of these. And I kind of liked this little apple thing there. Oh, that looks pretty. And some leaves. I think if I extend some of these leaves like this, put it in a nice little, oh, there's, look at that. That one's got acorns. I think I like that one there. And then maybe a nice larger leaf up there. We don't have to do it all at once. I think if we just do it in sections, and it's, you can tuck them underneath. Yeah, that's not bad. Once you get a few laid out, it's time to start holding them down. So you want to take your backing paper off, and what I like about this, you can see that backing paper stays on well. And I usually just give it a little bit of a ruffle and come to the edge, and hopefully, and that's just going to pop off like that. Perfect. If it doesn't, you can score it across with a pin and peel it from the center. Just peel it carefully, and you can see the glue on the back there. Pull it off carefully, garbage, and then lay this down. Whoops. Oh, there we go. Tuck it out into place. I like that. I like the curve there of this guy. So that's a good one. That's a keeper. Now I'm going to follow the instructions for this particular brand of fusible web. And I'm just going to press it with a dry iron. Usually takes about 4 seconds to hold it down like that. There, that's a good one. Which one will we do next? So this gives you the opportunity. You can create a whole quilt this way. Now, if you have one that doesn't come off easily, you give it a little bit of a ruffle. There we are. Something you can put the kids to work on. Here, peel this off for me. There we go. So I think I like this one here. And I think I like leaving a space between them. I could overlap them quite easily. I think I'm going to do that one there, and I think I'll take this leaf. Go right there. That guy. And I'm going to tuck this one just under the edge like that. Looks like everybody's having a good day. I don't have any questions yet. There we are. This is, it's almost like painting with fabric. it takes, applique is not to everyone's taste, and sometimes it's a case of you're working with solids or semi-solids and you're not too sure, and you have to trace the design, and you have to remember to reverse it a lot of times, which can sometimes throw people as well. This is almost, I won't say color by number because there is a certain amount of design to it. But if it's a fabric that is gorgeous, then you might as well love the elements. Sometimes it's just too much all at once. There we go. This guy, there we are. Oh, I'm liking this. There we go. So, those guys are done. Let's not forget what I'm doing here and forget to fuse some of these down. There we go. So I'm just kind of building a little swirl on my table runner here. I just, because I don't work Mondays and I do Tuesday Facebook, very often my Tuesday creations are thought up on the weekend. So I don't always have access to some of the fabrics here at the store. So I just pull from my stash. And it's interesting how we have such a nice selection of fall fabrics that are very, very similar to what I'm working with. Lorraine says she loves the fabric. Yeah, this was a great line. And I think Dawn has done a really nice job with the fall fabrics that she's laid out for us. I like to kind of preview a couple of shapes before I fuse them down. There we go. So once I get all these pieces on, I don't usually leave my fused applique raw edged. I tend to not quite trust it. I don't know if it's going to come apart with our changeable climate. Yeah, I like that better. I don't know if that one works or not. Maybe out here. Oh, that's better. Yeah, I like that better. So yeah, the glue used in fusible web can be a little bit sensitive to changes in climate, and we are really, really dry. So if you buy fusible web ahead of time and you want it for a future project, but you haven't quite decided what, try and store it in maybe in a plastic bag so that that glue doesn't dry out on you. All right, one more. Yeah, right there. Okay, I think we'll leave it at that. Nice thing is we can always add something afterwards. So now I've got all my pieces fused down. There we are, holding fairly well. Looks like the tip of that one might just need a little touch. So what I would do now at this point in the process is I want to stitch around all of the pieces to secure that edge. And I might continue my stitching and add a few curlicues. I think I'm liking this well enough to actually finish it and show it to you a little bit later on. Val's asking, have you used a type of X-Acto knife? I haven't done on fabric. I quite like using the scissors and fussy cutting that way, but you probably, I don't know if an X-Acto knife, it would be sharp enough to cut some of the fine things if you've got a really good pointed blade on it. But you'll have to tell me, Val, have you tried using an X-Acto knife and how does it work? So anyway, what you need to do, I like to edge stitch pieces like this. So you're going to want to put some sort of stabilizer on the back of your project before you start stitching all of these delicate little edges. Now you can use a blanket stitch, you can use a zigzag, you can use even a straight stitch. You can use a satin stitch around the edges, but you do have to stabilize your project. Let's switch you back for a minute. You do have to stabilize. Oh, Val uses art. Yeah. I love my X-Acto knife for some things, but I haven't tried it cutting fabric. That's a good project, Val. I think I will give it a try when I go home. I have one of the tiny bladed ones. And especially when the fabric is backed like this, it probably would cut quite nicely. So I like... So for a project like this, I think what I might be inclined to use as a stabilizer is some type of a fusible fleece. Like this is quite a thin one. This is the Fusion fleece from OESD. So that would then go behind my project, fuse that down carefully. We don't want to remelt the glue on the fusible. So we just want to hold our fleece onto our project so that it doesn't shift around when we go to stitch. And then carefully stitch around all of our pieces. Then obviously you can layer it and quilt it and carry on and use it. You can do blocks, individual blocks with individual images that you can then piece around and turn into a quilt, or you can do placemats. Why not? It's even a type of project or type of technique that you could use on clothing. Why not? You could fuse something like that onto clothing. Definitely make sure you stitch it down, because the fusible web can lift a bit in the laundry, and we tend to wash our clothing more than we wash our quilts. So lots of fun, lots of fabric to choose from, and a great way to use some of those gorgeous fabrics that we love to buy, and then we get it home and we stare at it for quite a while because we're not really sure what to do. We love it, it still speaks to us, but it doesn't just kind of fit in the types of quilts we're making. So, but this one, I think this one's a keeper. We'll work on it a little bit, and remember that everything that you put work into, you kind of quilt the love into it. It's special because you made it. So don't be afraid to try a new technique, try something different, experiment a little bit, and have a lot of fun. And use some of these gorgeous fall fabrics, because I really like this one, Miss Dawn. Dawn does this to me all the time. She puts these fabrics out here, and I go, oh, Dawn, I don't want to buy more fabric, but I have to. So that's what I have for you today. Hopefully everybody stays safe, stays calm, stays happy, and enjoys this fall, because, hey, next thing you know, we're going to be doing winter projects. Till next time, I'm not sure at all what's coming up this week, so it's quite possible I will see you a little bit later in the week with something else new, fun, and